3 weeks after her husband took everything, the house, the car, 30 years of her labor, Loretta used her last dollar left in the world to buy an abandoned restaurant. She opened a storage room door in the back of the kitchen. Inside were 31 bottles with her grandmother's name on them. She did not know it yet, but those bottles were about to trigger the downfall of the man who had spent 18 months making sure she had nothing. He missed one thing. The one thing that was about to destroy him. Stay with me, because what happens next will change how you see everything you think you have lost. The storage room smelled like dust and something underneath both of those things that Loretta could not immediately name. She had been standing in the doorway for 2 minutes without moving. She had not planned to open this door today. She had come to measure the kitchen, to figure out what equipment was functional and what needed replacing. She had a notepad in her hand and a list of things to check, and none of those things included the storage room at the back. But the door was there, and she opened it. The light from the kitchen fell across the floor and stopped at her feet. Beyond it, the room was dim. Broken chairs stacked against one wall, old equipment draped in cloth, boxes of paper supplies gone soft with age. 8 years of nobody coming in here. 8 years of a door staying shut. Against the back wall, covered in canvas, were wooden crates. She almost walked past them. She almost told herself it was old equipment and nothing more, and went back to her notepad and her list. She walked to them instead. She pulled the canvas back with one hand. Underneath were bottles, 31 of them, each one sealed with wax, each one bearing a handwritten label in ink that had faded but not disappeared. She picked one up. She read the label. She did not move for a long time. Treme Original. Estelle May Williams. New Orleans, Louisiana. Loretta stood in that storage room on Edgewood Avenue in Atlanta with her grandmother's name in her hands, and did not make a sound. She had $21,000 to her name. She had bought this building 3 weeks after her husband served her divorce papers. She had opened this door expecting nothing. She had not expected this. She did not know yet what it meant. She would get to know later on. Loretta grew up on Treme Street in New Orleans, in her grandmother's kitchen. Estelle May Williams cooked every day, and Loretta was beside her every day. The kitchen was where everything real happened in that house. Where the news of the day got discussed, where problems got talked through, where food came out of almost nothing and fed everyone who needed feeding. Estelle made hot sauce, a recipe that had been in the family for 2 generations before her. She started bottling it when Loretta was 12, because the neighbors kept asking, and Estelle decided if they were going to ask that many times, she might as well make it worth her while. Treme Original. When Loretta left New Orleans at 24 for Atlanta, her grandmother slipped 2 things into her hands. A recipe book, handwritten, every page full, 30 years of cooking recorded in Estelle's careful script, and a small photograph tucked inside the front cover. Estelle standing in front of her Treme Street kitchen in 1987. 31 years old, a jar of hot sauce in each hand, smiling like she knew something nobody else knew yet. Loretta carried both for 30 years. She married Calvin Simmons at 27. He was charming and ambitious, and he had a plan for everything, including her. She believed his plan and her instincts were the same thing. They were not. For 30 years she ran the household, raised 2 children, entertained his clients, and managed the books for his real estate firm without a salary or a title. Every connection Calvin had in Atlanta came through dinners she cooked and conversations she facilitated. She built the foundation of his life with her hands and her time and her intelligence. Her name was on none of it. Not on the firm, not on the accounts, not on the deed to the house they had lived in for 22 years. She had signed papers over the years without reading them carefully, because that is what you do when you trust someone. When you have no reason not to trust someone, you sign. You move on. You cook dinner. Calvin started planning the divorce 2 years before he served the papers. He had met someone at his firm, a woman 30 years younger, who saw in Calvin what Loretta had once seen, before she understood what was underneath. His lawyers spent 18 months restructuring what he could restructure. The house had gone through a refinancing 3 years earlier that transferred the deed into Calvin's name only. Loretta had signed that closing too. She remembered the pen in her hand. She did not remember anyone explaining what she was actually signing away. The business accounts were structured to make her contribution invisible. The savings moved to accounts in his name. The investments were locked in a trust naming Calvin as sole beneficiary. By the time Loretta's lawyer got involved, Calvin's team had an 18-month head start. The $22,000 left in the joint checking account was the one thing they missed. Everything else was already legally unreachable. She walked out of 30 years with $22,000, an old car, her clothes, and her grandmother's recipe book. Now here is the part that nobody sees coming. Keep watching. She kept $1,000 as a buffer. 3 weeks later, she was driving through the old Fourth Ward with no destination in mind, when she passed a shuttered building on Edgewood Avenue. The windows were papered over. The sign above the door was faded and peeling. A for sale notice was taped to the glass. She stopped the car. She sat there for a short while, looking at the building. Then she called the number on the notice. The building was Delia's, a soul food restaurant that had fed the old Fourth Ward for 20 years, before it closed 8 years ago. The owner, Miss Delia Pratt, 84 years old, living in a nursing home in Decatur, had been trying to sell it for 4 years. Nobody wanted it. The kitchen equipment was old. The neighborhood had changed. Every month she held it cost her money she did not have. Loretta offered $21,000, $10,000 below the asking price. Miss Delia said yes before Loretta finished the sentence. $21,000 in hand was better than $31,000 that had not come in 4 years. Loretta bought the building on a Thursday morning. She walked through it alone that afternoon. The kitchen was dusty but intact. The dining room needed work, but the bones were good. At the back of the kitchen was a storage room door she had not yet opened. She opened it. Old equipment, broken chairs, paper supplies gone soft with age, and against the back wall, the crates. You already know what she found. But standing there the second time, knowing now who she is, what was taken from her, what $21,000 means when it is everything you have left, the label on those bottles hits differently. This was not luck. A woman who had lost everything did not stumble into a storage room and find her grandmother's name on a bottle by accident. This was 30 years of a life that could not be reduced to a deed or an account balance or a trust document. Estelle's hot sauce ended up in this building because Estelle built something real, something that outlasted her, something that found its way across years and closed doors and an 8-year silence, to the one person it was always meant for. Loretta just had to show up. She did show up. With $21,000, a recipe book, and nothing else to lose. Treme Original. Estelle May Williams. New Orleans, Louisiana. Inside one of the crates was a folder. Correspondence between Estelle and Miss Delia, going back 15 years. Monthly orders, handwritten notes about which batches were the strongest and which needed more time. And beneath the correspondence, manufacturing agreements. Official documents, signed and dated, assigning the rights to Treme Original to Estelle May Williams and her direct heirs. Loretta read the agreements twice. She understood they were important. She did not yet understand how important. She took the folder and called a lawyer. The lawyer's office was on Auburn Avenue. Loretta sat across the desk, laid the folder out between them, and waited. The lawyer read through everything carefully. Then she looked up. Inherited brand rights assigned before marriage are separate property under Georgia law. This agreement was signed in 1987. You married Calvin Simmons in 1993. The agreement predates your marriage by 6 years. Your grandmother died in 2019. You are her only direct heir. She paused. The brand is yours. Clean. Legally sound. Nobody can touch it. Loretta sat with that for a while. 31 bottles of hot sauce in a storage room that nobody had opened in 8 years. Her grandmother's name on every label. Her grandmother's signature on every agreement. Sitting there for 8 years, waiting for the one person they belonged to. She asked the lawyer how much the brand might be worth. The lawyer did not know yet, but she knew who to ask. When Loretta filed the paperwork to formally assert ownership of Treme Original, the filing became public record. Rowan Elijah DuPree's team had an alert set for any legal activity connected to that brand. They had been looking for it for 3 years. They tracked it to New Orleans. They found that Estelle Mae Williams died in 2019. They could not find a surviving heir. The filing triggered the alert. Rowan's team contacted Loretta's lawyer within 2 weeks. They met at a restaurant in Midtown Atlanta on a Wednesday morning. Rowan's Choice, a Creole place he owned on Peachtree Street that smelled like the food Loretta had grown up eating. She noticed that immediately. She did not say anything about it. Rowan Elijah DuPree was 54 years old. Born in New Orleans, he had built DuPree Food Group from one Creole restaurant in Atlanta into the largest black-owned food and hospitality company in the American South. He had been acquiring authentic regional food brands for 8 years. Hot sauces, spice blends, regional condiments with real heritage and real stories. He understood the difference between a product and a legacy. He built his company on that distinction. Loretta had looked him up the night before, read the profile pieces. She expected someone polished and transactional. A man who had learned to wear warmth like a suit and take it off when the meeting was over. He was not that. He sat across from her, and before she could open the folder between them, he asked her what her grandmother's kitchen smelled like on a Sunday morning. Loretta looked at him. Cayenne and butter and something sweet underneath that I could never name, she said. Rowan nodded slowly. My grandmother's kitchen smelled the same way. 2 miles from Treme Street. I have been trying to find that flavor again for 3 years. I have tasted 50 hot sauces. None of them came close. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was everything his team had compiled on Treme Original. Distribution records from the 1990s, reviews in New Orleans food publications, letters from restaurants that had tried to source it after Estelle stopped producing. A handwritten note from a chef in Baton Rouge who said he had been trying to recreate the flavor for 11 years and had never come close. Loretta turned the pages slowly. Her grandmother had built something real, something people had been looking for long after she was gone. Nobody in Loretta's family had known. Estelle never hid it. Nobody ever asked. Loretta looked up from the folder. I am not here to buy you out, Rowan said. I am here to build something with you. Your grandmother's recipe, your name on it, my distribution. Equal partnership. Loretta closed the folder. I need to think about it, she said. Take your time, he said. She called him back the next morning. Loretta had expected Calvin to disappear from her life once the divorce was done. Take what he took. Move to the next thing. That was Calvin. That had always been Calvin. She was wrong. He came back for the one thing he had missed. Calvin found out through Camille. For months after the divorce, Loretta thought her daughter was the only one still on her side. Camille called every week, asked how she was doing, asked about the building, asked what Loretta had found inside, asked whether she had spoken to any lawyers. She sounded concerned. She sounded like a daughter who was worried about her mother. Loretta answered every question honestly, because Camille was her daughter and she had no reason not to. Every conversation was being forwarded to Calvin. Camille Simmons Archer, 28 years old, married, living in Charlotte, had been monitoring her mother since the day the papers were served. Calling regularly, asking careful questions, reporting back to her father what Loretta was doing, and where she was, and what she seemed to be accumulating. When Loretta bought the building on Edgewood, Camille told Calvin within 48 hours. When Loretta filed the brand ownership paperwork, Camille told him about that too. Calvin's lawyers filed a challenge in June. They argued that the brand was discovered during the period proceedings had not yet concluded, and therefore constituted a marital asset subject to division. They cited Camille's intelligence as supporting evidence. Her messages to Calvin, sent while she was calling her mother and asking how she was doing, were included in the court filing. Calvin called Loretta himself the night before the hearing. Loretta saw his name on the screen and sat with the phone in her hand for a long moment. Then she picked up. He said her name softly, like it meant something to him, like the 18 months of planning had not happened. "I am here," she said. He said the brand was not worth the fight, that they could settle quietly, that he was not trying to hurt her, that he just wanted what was fair. Loretta did not say anything at first. "Calvin," she said. "You took the house. You took the car. You took 30 years of my work and structured it so my name was on none of it. You had 18 months to decide what was fair. You already decided." He started to say something. "Do not call me again," she said. She hung up. She sat in her car outside the lawyer's office in the dark for a few minutes after that. Not crying. Not angry. She had stopped waiting for something to be different. She could feel that clearly now, for the first time. Then she went inside. At the first hearing, the judge read the manufacturing agreement. She read the date. She read the marriage certificate date. She read Georgia property law on inherited separate assets. She looked at Calvin's lawyer. She looked at Calvin. She closed the folder. Challenge dismissed. Calvin's lawyer billed him $34,000 for the filing. The filing was public record. Camille's husband read it online. He saw his wife's name in the supporting documents. He read what she had sent her father. He read the dates. Every message sent while Camille was calling her mother and asking how she was doing. He put the phone down and looked at his wife. Camille called Loretta 3 weeks later. She needed somewhere to go. Loretta listened to the whole call without interrupting. "You did not call me when I needed somewhere to go," Loretta said. She hung up. Calvin spent 30 years using legal structures to take things from people. He had done it to Loretta. He had done it to others. The others came forward when the federal investigation opened. Loretta never filed a complaint. The investigation opened because of a pattern that Calvin's lawyers could no longer contain, once it was examined in a courtroom rather than the privacy of a closing meeting. 3 other parties, similar structures, similar paperwork, similar results. Devin Calvin Simmons, 31 years old, 6 years at the firm, senior associate, had signed the documents. He had known what he was signing. He had done it because he believed his father's legal team had made everything untouchable, and because Devin had spent his entire adult life calculating where the money was going and making sure he was positioned to receive some of it. He had calculated wrong. The same documents that were supposed to protect Calvin became the evidence trail. Devin's name was on them. Clear. Dated. His signature on transfers that a federal investigator could follow in an afternoon. Devin called Loretta when the investigation opened. Not to apologize. To ask whether she had said anything to investigators, whether she had filed anything, whether there was anything she could do. Loretta listened to the whole call. Then she said she had not filed anything and had not spoken to anyone, and that whatever was happening to him, he had built it himself. She dropped the call. Devin lost his real estate license before his career had properly started. At 31 years old, his name was attached to a federal investigation, in an industry that runs on reputation. Nobody in Atlanta commercial real estate would return his calls. Calvin lost the firm. He lost his license. The woman from his office, the one he had left Loretta for, left him the month the investigation went public. She had never been there for him. She was there for what he represented. What he represented was gone, in the time it takes for a federal case to become public record. Calvin ended up in a one-bedroom apartment in Marietta with a federal case pending and a name nobody in Atlanta commercial real estate would touch. 30 years of deals, 30 years of suits and handshakes and dinners where he shook the right hands and said the right things and walked out with what he came for. 30 years of building something he was certain nobody could take from him. Reduced to a case number and an address in Marietta. He called Loretta once from that apartment. She put the phone face down on the counter and let it ring until it stopped. He called Devin. Devin did not pick up. Calvin was no longer useful to him. Devin only ever called people who were useful. Calvin sat in that apartment and understood for the first time what it felt like to build 30 years of something and watch it mean nothing to the people who were supposed to love you. He had built exactly what he deserved. Loretta drove to the nursing home in Decatur on a Tuesday morning. Miss Delia Pratt was 84 years old. Small. Alert. She had spent her whole life paying attention and had not stopped just because the world had moved her somewhere smaller. Loretta sat down across from her and introduced herself. Her name. Her grandmother's name. Miss Delia went completely quiet. Not confusion. Recognition. She had been waiting a long time to hear something, and had stopped expecting it to come. Estelle's granddaughter, she said. Yes, ma'am, Loretta said. Miss Delia looked at her for a long moment. I kept those bottles because I could not throw away something Estelle made with her own hands. When the restaurant closed, I locked that room and told myself I would figure it out later. Later became 8 years. I tried to reach Estelle, but she was already sick. Then she was gone. I did not know who to give them to. I just kept them, because throwing them away felt wrong. You kept them for me, Loretta said. You just did not know it yet. Miss Delia reached across and put her hand over Loretta's. They sat together in that small room for 2 hours. Miss Delia talked about Estelle, how she arrived every month with fresh bottles wrapped in cloth, how she never raised her prices even when Miss Delia told her she should, how she always asked about the customers by name, even though she had never met most of them. Loretta listened to every word. She had grown up beside this woman's closest friend, and had not known it until she opened a storage room door on Edgewood Avenue with $21,000 to her name. When she left, she called her lawyer from the parking lot. The monthly payment arrangement was drawn up that week. Not legally required. Miss Delia had held those bottles for 8 years without knowing who to return them to. Loretta was returning the favor. 8 months after the divorce, Ruthie Bowman sent a single text message. I just wanted you to know I never stopped thinking about you. You were always good to me. That was all. No ask, no angle, just that. Loretta read it 3 times before she called back. Ruthie had worked in the Simmons household for 14 years. She had seen things in that house she was not supposed to see. She had gone to Loretta quietly, not with proof, not with drama, and told her something did not feel right, and that Loretta should pay attention to the accounts. Loretta had not fully heard it at the time. She was too deep inside the life she had built to see what was being done to it from the outside. She heard it later. Sitting in a lawyer's office, understanding that the money had been moved, and the house was gone, and the man she had trusted for 30 years had spent 18 months preparing to leave her with nothing. Ruthie was the only person who tried to warn her. Calvin had fired her the week the papers were served. No notice, no severance, a text from his assistant that said her services were no longer required. 14 years, and a text from an assistant. Ruthie had spent 8 months doing housekeeping at a hotel in Buckhead. Less money, no benefits. Early mornings cleaning rooms for people who never looked up from their phones. She sent the text because she heard through someone in the neighborhood that Loretta had bought a building on Edgewood, and she wanted her to know she was thinking of her. She did not need anything back. She just wanted Loretta to know. When Treme on Edgewood opened, Ruthie was the front-of-house manager. Loretta had called her into the kitchen 2 days before opening, sat her down at the prep table, told her what she wanted to say before the noise of opening night made quiet conversations impossible. "You tried to warn me when nobody else did," Loretta said. "You saw what was happening in that house and you came to me and you told me the truth, even though it cost you something to say it." Ruthie started to say it was nothing. "It was not nothing," Loretta said. "This restaurant has a place for you. A real one. With your name on the board and benefits and everything that should have come with 14 years of showing up for someone." Ruthie did not say anything for a moment. "I just did not want you to be blindsided," she said. "I know," Loretta said. "That is why you are here." Ruthie had not had health insurance in 11 years. Her name went on the staff board the morning the restaurant opened. The old Fourth Ward. Edgewood Avenue. The line stretched down the block before the doors even opened. People who had watched the sign go up over the past month. People who had smelled something from the pavement during the soft opening and made a note to come back. People who had heard about the hot sauce through someone who heard about it through someone else. Word spreading quietly and fast across the old Fourth Ward until the whole block knew. Inside, the smell of Loretta's grandmother's recipes moved through every room and out the front door into the street. Cayenne and butter, and something sweet underneath that even the people who had never been to New Orleans recognized as the smell of food made by someone who cared. Every table was taken. The kitchen was running. Plates and conversation and laughter and the warm noise of a full room filled every corner of the building that 8 months ago had been a shuttered shell on a block nobody was paying attention to. People who had no idea they were standing in front of something that had been 30 years and one storage room door in the making. Before service began, Loretta went to the kitchen alone. She opened the recipe book. She turned to the front cover. She took the photograph out, for the first time, the one she had carried inside that book for 30 years without ever framing. Estelle Mae Williams. 1987, 31 years old, a jar of hot sauce in each hand, smiling like she knew something nobody else knew yet. Loretta had the photograph framed that afternoon. Plain wood frame, clean glass, no ceremony. She carried it to the wall next to the kitchen door herself and hung it there. Every person who walked into Treme on Edgewood walked past it. When the restaurant was full and every table was taken and the sound of people eating and talking filled every corner of the room, Ruthie appeared at Loretta's shoulder. They stood together in the kitchen doorway and looked out at what they had built. A room full of strangers eating food that almost never made it out of a storage room. A hot sauce on every table that had been sitting in wooden crates for 8 years, waiting for someone to come. A photograph on the wall of a woman who had bottled something real and trusted it would find its way to the right hands. It had found its way to Loretta Mae Simmons. 58 years old. Standing in a restaurant she bought with her last dollar, on a street she had never driven down before the day her marriage ended. Her grandmother's name above the kitchen door and her grandmother's recipes on every plate. Neither Ruthie nor Loretta said much. They did not need to. Calvin took the house. He took the car. He took 30 years of Loretta's labor and structured it carefully so her name was on none of it. He left her with $21,000 and a recipe book. He thought he left her with nothing. He left her with everything. Because the one thing he never understood about Loretta, the one thing he could not take because he could not see it, was where she came from. Her grandmother's kitchen on Treme Street. Those recipes. That hot sauce. The photograph tucked inside the front cover of a book he never once opened in 30 years of living in the same house as the woman who carried it. He had every advantage. He had lawyers and 18 months and every asset restructured in his name. And he still missed the thing that mattered. You cannot take what you cannot see. Some people spend their whole lives chasing what they can put their name on. Loretta inherited something much harder to steal. A recipe, a story, a grandmother who bottled her whole life into 31 jars and trusted that the right person would find them. The people who only see what something is worth on paper will always miss what actually matters. And by the time they realize it, it is already too late. Here at Storysphere, we believe the things nobody thinks are worth taking are sometimes the only things worth having. If this story moved you, send it to someone who needs to hear it. Calvin came back after the divorce and tried to claim Treme Original through his lawyers. He lost. He lost the firm. He lost his license. He lost the woman he left Loretta for. He lost everything he spent 30 years building. Here is the question. If someone spent 30 years taking from you, your house, your money, your name on nothing, and then finally faced every consequence of what they built, would you forgive them? Or would you let them sit with what they made? Leave your answer in the comments, because this one is going to split the room. This is Storysphere. We will see you in the next one.